Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please take a seat and we'll get started. Welcome to the 16th Australian Space Forum. My name is Michael Davis, Chair of the Andy Thomas Space Foundation, and it's my privilege to act as your MC for the first session of today's forum until the arrival of the far more accomplished host, Ms. Stacey Lee of ABC Radio Adelaide. The first thing we do is to welcome you to country, and it is my great honour to welcome Auntie Elaine Maguire to welcome us to country.
Ngā mani. Marawachanga gana miuna. Ngā wangiri mani na budni, gana yatana. Nature yugana dalia, nature yugana dalia. Budni adlu wadu. Hello, are you all good? On behalf of the Kaurna people, I welcome you to Kaurna country. My brothers, my sisters, let's walk together in harmony. I am Kaurna, Naranga and Nudgeri. I was born on this country, as my ancestors were for 600 years prior to my arrival. We as Aboriginal people are a diverse people. Not only do we speak different languages, have different practices, have different diets, we also have different backgrounds. Mine is of Chinese. My mother's great-grandfather was a Chinese man that came out for the gold rush, landed in South Australia and decided it was too far to walk to Ballarat. My father was Scottish, hence the freckles. Red-headed, green-eyed man. And I married a Greek who has Turkish ancestry. So you can see, as an Aboriginal woman, I encompass a multi-nation, as do my children. We are diverse, we are strong, and we have survived. Enjoy your conference today. I've welcomed you to country. Walk softly. Natalia.
Thank you to Auntie Elaine for that deadly welcome to country. I use the adjective deadly advisedly. It was an adjective that we learnt to use at our dinner last evening. And I also, of course, welcome all of our distinguished guests and all of our presenters and attendees. I know that I speak on behalf of the Foundation, the presenters and all of our attendees in acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and stating that we pay our respects to their elders and to their living culture. We extend the same respect to all First Nations peoples present today. The Andy Thomas Space Foundation plays a key role in the Australian space sector by driving progress and development in space education, innovation and outreach. A key element in delivering our innovation mission is this Australian Space Forum, which is Australia's premier national space conference. We had a very quiet and brief celebration yesterday when for the first time we discovered that we had 1,000 registered delegates at this event today, and we are delighted with that turnout. Today's Australian Space Forum will once again take the lead in the national discourse. The policy themes of security and collaboration will be explored in the morning session with the focus on Asia-Pacific regional cooperation. And I extend a warm welcome in particular to the President of the Japanese Space Exploration Agency, Professor Hiroshi Yamakawa, and his colleague, Professor Masaki Fujimoto, both of whom will deliver keynote addresses. The JAXA MMX mission briefing will no doubt draw significant interest given the unique role South Australia and Woomera will play in the successful delivery of that mission. Our own Mr. Enrico Palermo, head of the Australian Space Agency, will bring a uniquely Australian perspective, concluding the morning with a panel session involving space industry leaders from New Zealand, Singapore and Japan. Australia's space development's new opportunities will be the subject of afternoon deliberations, with the keynote delivered by Mr. Phil Brownette, Managing Director of Surrey Satellite Technology Limited. We also welcome delegates from the European Space Agency, CSIRO, and briefings on the Moon to Mars Trailblazer program and the University Trailblazer programs. A timely discussion on workforce challenges presently facing the sector will close the forum, and then we will look forward to having some refreshments in the exhibition hall. We see our role as the foundation to share the excitement, opportunity and wonder of space with the entire Australian community. And the 15th forum represents the commencement of an exciting period of transition as we prepare to take our mission of education, innovation and outreach to a national audience. As those of you who attended the dinner last evening will be aware, in responding to feedback from many of our delegates from other parts of Australia, we have decided that it is time to extend our national reach by holding the next forum in Sydney at the International Convention Centre at Darling Harbour on Wednesday the 6th of December this year. Thereafter, our plan is to conduct one forum each year in Adelaide and one forum each year in another Australian city venue. Wish us luck as we take on the challenge of demonstrating the truly national character and reach of the Australian Space Forum and the geographic diversity of our industry. Thank you to our generous sponsors who share our passion for space, including our platinum sponsor, AMDA, the host of the Avalon Air Show and other major industry events, our gold sponsors, Lockheed Martin, Surrey Satellite Technology and Deloitte, silver sponsors, the Italian Trade Agency, the University of Adelaide, BRAMAC, the CSIRO and Silencium Defence, our technology sponsor Keysight, our exhibition lounge sponsor Sabre Astronautics, our lunch and tea break sponsor Ernst & Young, our networking hour sponsor Sinspective, please excuse my poor pronunciation, our venue sponsor the Adelaide Convention Centre, and we also acknowledge and thank our key governmental supporters, the South Australian Space Industry Centre and the Australian Space Agency, for their ongoing and steadfast support. The 15th Forum has been created by a program planning committee comprising our good friend and colleague Peter Nikolov as chair, Professor Andy Coronius, Thomas Lewis from the Australian Space Agency, Dr. Catherine Grace from SASIC, and our Executive Officer Darcy Watson, and of course our Executive Director, the Honourable Grace Portalisi. Thank you for your expert advice and tireless efforts. It is now my honour to invite not just the Deputy Premier, but the Acting Premier of South Australia to open the forum. The Honourable Susan Close is very well known to many of you. She has had a distinguished career in politics and before that in academia, and it gives me great pleasure to invite the Deputy Premier and Minister for Defence and Space Industry, Dr. Susan Close, to open the forum.
Thank you and good morning all. Michael's done an excellent job of acknowledging many of the important people, although of course everyone here is important. And I would particularly like to welcome President Yamakawa. It was a pleasure to spend yesterday evening with you, and we're very grateful that you and your colleagues have chosen to be here. I would like to single out, in addition though to the names already mentioned, that my colleague on the other side of the chamber, Stephen Patterson, is here with us today, former Minister, and perhaps Minister yet to come again. It's so important that space be recognised as a bipartisan effort across both sides of our Parliament, and I'm very pleased that you're able to be here today, and you're very welcome. I would like to thank Auntie Elaine for her welcome to country, and say how grateful I am to have been born, to live, to work, and today to meet on Kaurna land. Always was, and always will be, Aboriginal land. For those who've come from overseas, we are currently in a process of having a large national conversation about how we reconcile with our history and how we embrace the Aboriginal heart of Australia. And one of the reasons that we are doing that, and there are many, but one of the reasons is to fully understand all the ways in which culture can enrich our lives. There is not one culture on this earth, there are many, and each have so much to offer, and particularly One Nation's cultures, with their understanding and respect for the planet, for the country that sustains us, has much to teach everybody else. And when I think about that diversity of culture, I think also on the other side of all that unites us as people. And having international visitors here again reminds us that space is one of those endeavours that draws us together. And in fact, while space feels relatively new, the impetus behind it is as old as humanity. We are an exploring species. The Aboriginal people who came here at least 65,000 years ago, they showed tremendous courage, and they were curious, and they made it across the planet to come to settle this land and then to spread across this land. Not unlike our early tentative starts in understanding our immediate solar system and our desire to explore further. The Aboriginal people also came here and had to solve a lot of problems and invent a lot of new ways of dealing with what confronted them. Last night we had the iriki, sometimes known as the didgeridoo, played for us, a musical instrument unique to Australia, unique to Yolngu culture in the Northern Territory. We know of the boomerangs, of the throwing sticks, and also of the ways in which Aboriginal people manage to live in this extreme and often very harsh land. Problem solving is something that is true for all of us, all humans, and space demands that of us and gives us the opportunity to inquire, to invent, to solve problems in different ways. Humans are also acquirers of knowledge. And one of the reasons we celebrate Aboriginal culture is we have 65,000 years worth of knowledge about how to live here to draw upon. But getting information, processing it and using it is equally part of our reason for wanting to be in space, to better understand what's around us, but also to better understand what is here. And if we're to solve the problem of climate change and how to manage our planet in a sustainable way, we cannot do that without space. We cannot do that without being able to see what is here, to process the information and to act upon it. whether that's long-term forecasting or whether that's understanding how much water is in a particular area and how we sustainably apply only the additional amount required. That is only possible because we've chosen to leave Earth and to look back and understand better. The impetus to understand space may feel new, but it is as old as humans are. And in that context, our continual desire to get together and talk about it and share is equally as old as humanity. It is wonderful that here we are at the 15th Space Congress, organised by the extraordinary Andy Thomas Foundation. It is wonderful that we're able to do this so frequently. It is probably a mark of the generosity of South Australians that we've decided that we'll share every other one. We're going to keep one a year, but we'll share every other one with other parts so that everyone here feels included, able to contribute, and able also to show what they have to offer, because this has to be a shared effort. Now, we know that budgets and governments put different emphases on different industries at different times. And we know that there's money that comes in and then sometimes money that disappears. That can be trying, but it is not insurmountable. We know that this project is here for the very, very long term. We know that improving our technology in space, our acquisition of knowledge from space, is something that will shape this century, and that we're all dedicated to doing that. And the fact that we have 1,000 delegates here today in Adelaide to talk about, to share, to learn, demonstrates our very strong commitment. So I congratulate all of you on being here. I thank you, and I hope you have a superb day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Susan Close. It is now my great honour to introduce to you the President of the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, Professor Hiroshi Yamakawa. We met Professor Yamakawa last evening, and we were treated to a very interesting and entertaining conversation that you had, Professor, with our MC, Stacey Lee. And I won't attempt to summarise or repeat what we learnt, except to point out that you spent the first, 12 years of your life in an English-speaking environment, and I remember you said that so your standard of English is that of a Year 7 student. I can assure you that it is much greater than that, and I won't repeat your long and distinguished CV, except to say that you have been the President of JAXA for 5 years, and this is your first ever visit to Australia, so we are greatly honoured to have you, and it gives me great pleasure to invite you to give your keynote address.
Well, thank you very much for your kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hiroshi Yamakawa, President of JAXA. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be here with you at the 15th Australian Space Forum. Thank you very much. Thanks to the kind invitation by Enrico, the head of ASA, Australian Space Agency, I'm happy to visit this beautiful country, and I'm pleased to be here with all of you in person. It is my great honor to present JAXA's activities and the space cooperation between the two countries. But before I start, I would like to introduce the images I'm showing you right now in front of you. These are images taken by JAXA's Global Change Observation Mission, GCOM-C satellite, which observes climate change through global scale observations of clouds, aerosols, ocean color, vegetation, and so on. And here you can see the dynamic profiles of Australian continent captured by the satellite. We have southern Brisbane region on the left, and Woomera Desert in the center, and the Great Barrier Reef on the right. Now, I would like to talk something about Japanese history about space development. And Dr. Itokawa on the left was the professor of the University of Tokyo. Before becoming a university professor, he was an aircraft engineer at an aircraft company before World War II. And he was the first person to engage in Japan's space development with his test launch of a pencil rocket. It's actually a size of pencil with only 23 centimeters in 1955. And 15 years later, in 1970, Japan's first satellite, Osumi, was launched from Kagoshima, our launch site, Kagoshima Space Center. With this, Japan became the fourth country in the world to launch its domestically developed satellite by using also a domestically developed launch vehicle rocket. By the way, it was a solid propellant launch vehicle. Now I'm going to talk about what we are and what we are doing. JAXA is basically a research and development agency, but at the same time, we are defined as the core implementing agency to support the overall activities of the Japanese government related to space. So that means that we are taking on a wide range of missions such as Earth observation, space science, human spaceflight, launch vehicles, satellite data for various purposes, national security, and everything. So that's what we are and what we are doing. Because there's not enough time, I go to the most important part of my talk. So I would like to introduce some of the highlights of the Japan-Australia Space Cooperation to date. Since 1978, well, about 40 years ago, the Australian Bureau of Meteorology has been receiving data from Japan's geostationary meteorological satellite Himawari, and also near real-time data from JAXA's Global Change Observation Mission for water. We call it GCOM-W since 2012. And in 1987, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, CSIRO, started to receive data directly from JAXA's oceanographic satellite, MOS-1, and conducted research using those data. And in 2002, a satellite called FedSat, as the first Australian satellite since the launch of Oscar 5 in 1970, was launched on board Japan's H-2A rocket as part of a commemorative project to celebrate the centenary of the Australian Federation, or the Commonwealth of Australia. In addition, to the right, you can see a picture of a very long baseline interferometry. There's no time to explain what BLBI is, but it's we have done a lot of science cooperation using this technology together. And in 2017, JAXA installed its telescopes at the Australian National University's Siding Spring Observatory to conduct space debris observations. This made it possible for us to observe the skies of the southern hemisphere, which cannot be done from Japan. There are also a couple of photos. I would like to show a couple of photos of JAXA's flight experiments conducted in Woomera in the 1990s and 2000s. The left is ALFLEX project, an experimental unmanned aircraft built to establish the basic technology of automatic landing, which aimed to build Japan's reusable unmanned space planes. ALFLEX completed 13 automatic landing flight experiments in 1996 in Woomera. And on the right is a supersonic flight experiment conducted in 2005, also in Woomera, involving an experimental aircraft called Next One as part of our effort to develop a supersonic airplane. So based on these flight testings and also based on our R&D, we plan to develop supersonic planes working with Japanese companies by 2030. And since 2015, JAXA has been conducting scientific balloon experiments at the Alice Springs Balloon Launching Station in Australia's Northern Territory in accordance with an agreement between JAXA and CSIRO. As we speak, JAXA researchers are currently engaging in balloon experiment in Alice Springs in order to conduct cosmic gamma ray observation by our gamma ray telescope, which was successfully completed on April the 30th, last week. And also, we're going to do evaluation of aerodynamic stability of the Hayabusa type capsule at transonic and low speeds. And I'd like to thank Mr. Palomo for visiting the test site last week to meet the JAXA team and to observe the preparations. In addition, using signals from Japanese QZSS satellites, which means Quasi-Zenith Satellite System, it's the positioning or navigation satellite system, several technology demonstrations were conducted in Australia with the cooperation of Japanese and Australian companies. For example, demonstration tests of agricultural work performed by automatically controlled tractor in New South Wales in 2015. Also, driving demonstration of self-driving cars in Melbourne in 2018. And also, demonstration test of soil volume measurement in Sydney in 2021. In July 2020, JAXA and Australian Space Agency signed an MOC, Memorandum of Cooperation on Space Cooperation for Peaceful Purposes, and the signing ceremony was attended by the former Australian ambassador to Japan and the Japanese ambassador to Australia. This signing of this MOC became a topic of a conversation during the Japan-Australia summit meeting held 2 days later, and the two leaders welcomed the promotion of cooperation between the two space agencies. As Australia and Japan continue to expand and deepen our space cooperation, thanks to the establishment of cooperative relationship between the two space agencies, JAXA look forward to working with Australian Space Agency colleagues as major partners in the Asia-Pacific region to jointly enhance space activities in this region. Next, I would like to talk about Hayabusa 2. As you can see, the return of the Hayabusa 2 samples from the asteroid Ryugu took place in December 2020, during the height of COVID-19 pandemic. We needed to send many JAXA team members to Woomera for this sample recovery operation mission when many countries around the world were experiencing lockdowns, including Australia. Thanks to the amazing support by the colleagues at the ASA, we were able to work with the federal government, South Australian state government, the Department of Defence to obtain a special permission for the entry of about 80 JAXA staff members. It's a large team, into Australia. And after 14 days of quarantine, they were able to travel to Woomera to work on the recovery of the capsule. It sounds simple now, but this was a major challenge that time for us to realize this recovery mission when the world was experiencing this unprecedented scale of pandemic in recent human history. So once again, I would like to sincerely thank all of you, all of my friends in Australia, who offered incredible support and partnership which allowed this mission to succeed. Thank you very much. No, not yet. Sorry. Still 10 minutes. As the Asian country participating in the International Space Station, JAXA is also promoting cooperation with Asia-Pacific countries, offering programs to develop future space professionals. Established in 2012, our Kibo ABC program, which means Kibo Asian Beneficial Collaboration Program, aims to provide young people in this region with opportunities to learn about leading-edge sciences through their participations in experiments under space conditions conducted on board Japan's Kibo experiment modules of the International Space Station. From Australia, the Australian National University has been a member of this program since its launch in 2012, and in 2019, Australian Space Agency also joined this program, Kibo ABC. So Australia is now represented by these two institutions. Over the years, hundreds of thousands of students and researchers from around the world have participated in these programs conducted under the Kibo ABC initiative. They are, number one, Space Seeds for Asian Future Program, a plant cultivation experiment program in which astronauts cultivate plants in orbit, and students continue to cultivate and analyze these plants on the ground, following the plants' return to the Earth. The second endeavor is Asian Tri-Zero-G program, which is a space experiment proposed by middle and high school students, is demonstrated by Japanese astronauts on board the International Space Station. Number three, Kibo Robot Programming Challenge, robot programming competition on board a Kibo module to provide students with an opportunity to challenge themselves in STEM. I'd like to share something impressive about the impressive about the team that represented Australia in this program, the Robot Programming Challenge. Team Dream Rover from Sydney has represented Australia in the last 2 years, and they came in 6th out of 286 teams in 2021 and 8th out of 350 teams in 2022, competing against teams from over 10 countries from all over the world, including United States, Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, New Zealand, and so on. I'd like to salute them for their wonderful efforts. As for this year's Australian participation in the Kibo ABC program, I have been informed that Australian students will be participating in the Asian Tri-Zero-G and Kibo Robot Programming programs. I would like to thank the ASA, the One Giant Leap Australia Foundation, and the Australian Federal Government for their continued support in promoting Kibo ABC-related activities in Australia. And as one of the Kibo ABC program, Asian Hub in Space is an annual space education program that provides youths and researchers in the Asia-Pacific region with an opportunity to take part in space-related biology, experiment, and research. The participating students will get the opportunity to grow seeds that spend time with astronauts on the ISS. This upper left photo shows the handover ceremony of seeds of golden wattle, Australia's national flower, at the Australian Embassy in Japan, in Tokyo, in 2020. The seeds of the golden wattle were launched to the International Space Station in December 2020. And then the seeds spent about 7 months in space and after return, some of them are now growing at the embassy in Tokyo, as you can see on the photo on the right. On the Australian front, the seeds from space were handed back to Australia in the summer of 2021, where they were used for educational purposes. We're pleased to hear that about 250,000 students from 150 schools across Australia participated in experiments using the seeds. In November 2021, a seeding ceremony for the golden wattle seeds that had traveled in space for several months was held at Caulfield Primary School and Frankston High School in Victoria, attended by Japan's Consul General Shimada and officials from ASA, the Victorian Department of Education and Training, and the One Giant Leap Australia Foundation. We sincerely hope that these activities will serve an opportunity for young Australians to develop an interest in space, and that they will grow up to be future leaders of space. Now, I would like to talk something about the multilateral frameworks in space. The guideline principle for space exploration cooperation, the Artemis Accords, was signed in 2020 by the United States, Australia, Canada, UK, Italy, Luxembourg, UAE, and Japan. JAXA would like to contribute to the Artemis program by providing the gateway with habitation functions, which is the lunar orbiting station, engaging in resupply missions, as well as cooperating on the lunar surface for future sustainable exploration activities, utilizing JAXA's expertise in manned and unmanned space technologies. On the Australian side, I'm aware that Australian Space Agency has plans to offer products and services that utilizes the capabilities of Australian space industry. As members of the first 8 nations, members of the first 8 nations to have signed the Artemis Accords, I'm encouraged that we will be engaged in the future of international space exploration together with Australia. Next is about the Quad. As part of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, Quad, space cooperation between Australia, US, India, and Japan, intergovernmental discussions have begun on cooperation on climate change, marine resource protection, and norms and guidelines in space. I also would like to mention that a company, SpaceBD, a Japanese commercial provider of a satellite deployment service of the Japanese Kibo module on the ISS, has successfully deployed 2 CubeSats from the Curtin University in Perth and QUAVA, which means the Australian Research Council Training Centre for CubeSats, UAVs, and their applications, in October 2021. Another important areas of cooperation involves space business collaboration between the two countries. Based on a proposal by Mr. Palomo Enrico about a year ago, JAXA, ASA, and the Austrade have been working together to organize the first ever space B2B event in Australia between the two countries, which was held yesterday successfully here in Adelaide. 9 companies from Japan and 10 companies from Australia participated, conducting valuable face-to-face information exchange and business discussions. I believe this is an important step in future space cooperation between our countries, and I would like to thank again the participants from both countries, as well as ASA, Austrade staff members who greatly contribute to the organization of this event. Also, coordination is currently underway between JAXA and ASA to establish an implementing arrangement to promote cooperation between our space industries. We hope to sign this agreement as part of the MOC between JAXA and ASA that was signed in 2020 to demonstrate our commitment to space industry cooperation between our countries. Now I would like to, because timing running out, but I would like to briefly touch upon the future collaborations that are on the horizon between the two countries in space. And regarding future science cooperation, we are excited about the prospect of working together with you in MMX, which is the Martian Moon Exploration Mission. And as was the case with the Hayabusa missions, we hope to return the capsule containing samples from the Martian moon Phobos to the Woomera Desert. I don't want to spoil Dr. Fujimoto's presentation, so I would like to skip the details and just say that we are very excited to work with you on this again, and we appreciate your partnership. And I also would like to touch upon the Kibo utilization workshop. JAXA and ASA hope to organize Kibo utilization workshop in Australia sometime this year to introduce to researchers and engineers here what kind of experiments can be conducted on board ISS. The workshop will provide the latest information on a variety of space research, especially microgravity experiments that are conducted on board the Japanese Kibo module on the International Space Station. The main objective of the workshop is to find potential space experiments and technical demonstrations proposed by Australian users. If you have any ideas for space experiment that are interested in taking part of this workshop, please inform ASA or JAXA so that we can cover your research topic in the workshop. And finally, I would like to talk about the APSF, which is an Asia-Pacific Regional Space Agency Forum, which was established in 1993 to enhance space activities in the Asia-Pacific region. Space agencies, governmental bodies, international organizations, private companies, universities, and research institutes from over 30 countries and regions take part in this APSF. The increasing attendance of high-ranking officials and participants from industry at APSF events provides opportunities to discuss international cooperation for space activities in concrete terms. Last year's annual event held in cooperation with Vietnamese National Space Center, VNSC, in Hanoi, was attended by about 360 participants from 36 countries, and 44% of the participants were from the private sector. This year's annual session will take place from September 19th to 22nd in Jakarta, Indonesia, co-hosted by our colleagues at the Indonesian National Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN, and we very much look forward to having many participants also from Australia this year. And finally, and the last but not least, the APSF 30 will be organized in Perth in 2024, together with ASA. And we sincerely welcome the third APSF meeting to be held in Australia following the APSF 11 held in Canberra in 2004 and the APSF 17 held in Melbourne in 2010. And we look forward to working closely with ASA and the Western Australian state government to prepare for the 30th annual session. Thank you for the kind attention.
Thank you, Professor Yamakawa, for that most informative and interesting presentation. It now gives me great pleasure to invite our good friend, Mr. Enrico Palermo, head of the Australian Space Agency, to give you his keynote and update on everything that is happening in this country. I won't take extra time to tell you about his distinguished career. I'm sure many of you are very aware of Enrico's history, and it is always a pleasure to welcome Enrico to the stage.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning. Distinguished guest colleagues, it's an absolute pleasure to be back here at the Convention Centre for the 15th Australian Space Forum. Let me, of course, also start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today, the Kaurna people, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I extend that acknowledgement to all the First Nations people that work in our space ecosystem proudly around our nation. I want to give my congratulations to the Andrew Thomas Space Foundation on a very successful forum again. This forum brings the nation together, and that's been proven again this week. My acknowledgement to the Deputy Premier, Acting Premier, Susan Close, Honourable Susan Close, and your remarks this morning were timely and accurate about how we think about the longevity of what we're doing and how it ties to important things such as climate change in our nation. Hiroshi, President Yamakawa, head of JAXA, it's been a true honour to host you and your delegation, Mr. Ishii and Professor Fujimoto and all of the JAXA team and the Japanese trade delegation. And thank you for the wonderful remarks. I think many in the audience probably didn't respect how deep the collaboration is. Obviously, we have some huge milestones of success, such as Hayabusa 2, but as Hiroshi went through the slides, hopefully you appreciated the depth of that relationship, and it was a real pleasure to head up to Alice Springs last Monday to meet the team and see the successful termination of the grain mission. It's important I acknowledge our other significant international guests. We have representatives from the Korean Embassy, the New Zealand Space Agency, the European Space Agency, the Italian Trade Agency, taking part in today's forum, as well as His Excellency Vasyl Milyushenko, Ambassador of Ukraine to Australia. Thank you for joining us and all our other international guests. When we were here in October, you may recall we were hosting a very significant French trade delegation. And for me, that really signifies the forum's not just a place to talk about what we're doing in our ecosystem, but to bring the world to Australia. And that's one of the reasons we are proud supporters of this forum. But also another key reason is the hundreds of thousands of dollars the foundation has put into STEM education around the nation. And so we fervently support this initiative. For me, there's never been a more important time for Australia to have a significant role, a really meaningful role in the global space industry. I'm convinced of that. It drives me every day, and I'm proud to lead a team at the agency that is so determined to see that through. In July, the Australian Space Agency will celebrate our 5th anniversary or birthday, and no doubt many of you will remember the moment at the International Astronautical Congress in 2017 when, to rapturous applause, we welcomed the news we would finally have a space agency in Australia. And it was definitely a momentous occasion that I feel catalysed the nation around the opportunity space presents. And our work's far from done, but I think history will show the establishment of the agency has spurred a national space renaissance, a pivotal moment in our nation's history, where we realised we have all the necessary and essential ingredients, and I like to say unfair advantages globally to take our contribution to a new level. If you fast forward today, we see over 600 organisations across industry, academia and government working directly in the space sector in Australia, and over 16,000 employees. This upwards momentum and growth and evolution and maturing of our space sector has seen the world enthusiastically look into Australia for space collaboration. And that's not something that happens overnight, and we're not done, as I said, but it speaks to the criticality of your work, your efforts, combined with having now a National Space Agency. And I want to reflect on some comments from NASA's Deputy Administrator, Pam Melroy, who said at the National Press Club last month during her visit, "I was so delighted at the formation of the Australian Space Agency for many reasons, to see Australians tap into the global market and global capability. For NASA, our partners are space agencies. Prior to that, Australia had no front door for us. There was no one for us to go to and partner with and engage with. We have a great relationship with CSIRO around the Deep Space Tracking Station, but what we do is we engage with space agencies across a full range, whether it's space, climate, aeronautics, exploration. So the formation of the Space Agency was critical for us," Pam Melroy said. As evidenced by her words, a true friend of Australia, we are focused on nurturing those partnerships internationally, partnerships that need to have meaningful and beneficial outcomes for all of the ecosystem. And so I want to take a few moments to summarise some of those. Given our guest of honour, it makes sense, of course, to start with Japan. And I'm not going to repeat the depth of the collaboration, but again, we are honoured to have you here today. We are global leaders with Japan in science, and our collaboration extends to more than 40 years. More than 40 years ago, a bilateral treaty was signed that built on mutual collaboration in science and technology, and we now see that significantly extending into space. Our partnership reached a pivotal point, as Hiroshi covered, when we shared the incredibly special milestone of the Hayabusa 2 capsule returning here in December 2020. And I want to say thank you from Australia in letting us be part of that important mission. And as our respective Prime Ministers announced last year, we will continue that with the inspirational MMX mission later this decade. Space is responsible for some of the world's most cutting-edge science, and Australia's support of MMX will bring collaborative science opportunities to our research sector and reaffirm our role, our offering as a returns destination. I'm personally excited about making Australia the destination for returning objects from space, doing it in a responsible way, but leveraging those unfair advantages of our geography, our landscapes, our low population density, our ability to track, and our supporting government. We need to harness those unfair advantages at every opportunity. They've seen us do that with NASA and in particular Europe, so turning to the European Space Agency. Australia and Europe have had treaties in place since 1979, which have enabled ESA ground stations on Australian soil to track spacecraft that are making revolutionary scientific interplanetary discoveries. With the European Space Agency, the Australian Space Agency are now building upon this strong history to ensure a deeper space partnership to deliver meaningful outcomes, bringing benefits to both our space sectors. So with the support of our International Investment Initiative, construction is currently underway on a new antenna at ESA's new Norcia site in Western Australia. And I had a pleasure to visit that site with our advisory board to see the construction progress in March. New Norcia 3 will bring new insights across space research and exploration and build again on that long-standing partnership. It's a partnership now that is going beyond deep space tracking and science. As I'm sure you all know, one of our own agents, Catherine Bernal-Pegg, is currently training to become an astronaut with the European Space Agency in Germany. Catherine is the first person to be trained with the Australian flag on her shoulder by a major space agency. It's a powerful symbol that is inspiring more people into STEM careers and shows all Australians that dreams can come true. But beyond the inspiration of that milestone, it's also an important opportunity for the Australian space sector. It's part of why we did it. Catherine and the agency are actively working with ESA to leverage this training opportunity to improve access for Australian sciences and engineers into global space programs. It's also a great opportunity to build on the work we've been doing on applied space medicine and life sciences, for example. And it was such a thrill. There was a photo recently of Catherine alongside this skin suit that was developed by Australian company Human Aerospace and RMIT, which is on display at the European Astronaut Centre. This suit, which was partially funded by the agency, has now flown twice to the International Space Station for testing, and again emphasising the role we have in enabling science for the nation. Now briefly to the US. Our long-standing partnership with NASA is the stuff of Aussie folklore. Most Australian knows, probably not the full details if you rely on the cinematic representation only, the role we of course played in Apollo and the first steps on the moon. So in March, we were thrilled to host NASA's Administrator, Senator Bill Nelson, and Deputy Administrator Colonel Pam Mulroy for a generous amount of their time, both here in Adelaide, in Canberra. And this was the first visit of a sitting NASA Administrator to Australia since 2014, and emphasised the importance NASA places on the relationship, and that definitely bore out in discussions we recently had in the US. To mark their visit, Minister Husic announced the 2 successful Australian consortiums who are now designing our rover that will go to the moon in 2026 or 2027 in partnership with NASA. So my congratulations to Rose and to EPE and Lunar Outpost, as well as their consortium partners around Australia. We're going to the moon. Let's just take a moment to reflect on that. This is our boldest step yet. It's not our only step, but it's an incredible first step, and you'll hear from those two consortiums later today. The NASA leaders both said that Australia is in a prime position to expand our role in space exploration as NASA and its international partners return to the moon and onto Mars. And I imagine everyone in the room, want Australia to have a bigger share of the Artemis future. Not just through our first lunar rover, but by bringing together the leading, unique capabilities we have across a diverse set of disciplines. The agency is spearheading this through what we call Team Artemis Australia, a platform we have been sharing in many of our engagements with international stakeholders, including NASA. Team Artemis Australia is putting the spotlight on our nation and the key role we can play to attract more collaboration, more private investment, and technology transfer for this new era of exploration. And I was incredibly heartened by the enthusiastic response Ord and I received to this work in Colorado a few weeks ago. And you hear a little bit more about that from Ord today. It's also important that our international partnerships bring direct commercial opportunities for the space sector as well as in international markets. And we're doing this as well through our partnerships with UK and India. In partnership with the Indian Space Research Organisation and InSpace, which is the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorisation Centre, we're unlocking opportunities through our International Space Investment India Projects program, quite a lengthy name. The program will see the Australian government invest more than $20 million over the next 4 years into those collaborations, looking at joint projects between India and Australia across areas of mutual priority. And I encourage you to seize this opportunity with applications closing next month. There's also strong alignment with Australia and the UK space sectors as we look at our Space Bridge program, which has led to partnerships between LATConnect 60 and SARI satellite technology, joint research projects led by the SmartSat CRC, and also Australian startup Hero Robotics, having them enter the UK market, just as some examples. And I applaud the UK Space Agency on their launch of their recent international bilateral fund. So that's just a sample of some of our international collaborations. I could talk for a very long time. That's not an exhaustive list, but I wanted to demonstrate Australia is increasingly a space partner of choice, and as the agency we take our role as the front door for the nation to space very seriously. We're a trusted and valued partner, and we saw that in Space Symposium last month. But we can't just celebrate the wins and dwell in the past. Space by its nature is dynamic, it's fast, it's forward-leaning. So where are we going? What does the future look like? And it's a question we rightly ask ourselves. At this critical junction, as access to capital becomes tougher and investors hone their focus, it's important we continue to establish space as a cross-cutting enabler. And this touches on what I addressed at my last keynote in October. We must view space as an industry that expands beyond the roles of what we know as space in its pure sense. We need to draw on and contribute to the full breadth of what Australian industry offers, from advanced manufacturing to health to resources and national security. It's not enough to justify our program as an existence as being a first for space in Australia. There has to be more to it. There has to be science, there has to be opportunity, there has to be a connection to improving life on Earth and a market for the particular innovation. From an agency perspective, we are ensuring space plays a key role in government strategies and initiatives to address climate change and those that mature critical technologies. We need to establish space as a fundamental enabler for quantum, AI, robotics and automation, areas of priority for the Australian government, and I commend Professor Andy Koronius, the CEO of SmartSat CRC, on his passionate launch of the Scarlet Lab last night, which is definitely framed to these priorities. The Australian Space Agency is contributing to these discussions and consultations across government that will help form the strategic vision across these critical areas. And we already have strong evidence of space being a key lever It's demonstrated in our roadmaps and through innovative companies like Advanced Navigation, a company that has raised significant funds, was a grant recipient from the agency, and has developed the world's first quantum-enabled inertial navigation solution for space vehicles that's going to go to the moon this year. Or if you look to fleet space here in Adelaide in terms of government priorities, we were there yesterday with the Japanese delegation. They're using connectivity in space to capitalise on the incredible demand and important demand for critical minerals with this exosphere technology. And their work aligns with our ambition for Australia to be a leader in foundation services. And there was a beautiful moment with Hiroshi at Fleet when we were standing near the sand pit where Matt and the team have the geodes, and he says, "This is exactly what I thought Australia would be doing in space." Investments in space in Australia must drive benefits here on Earth too. And one only has to look at the work taking place at the Australian Research Centre Centre for Excellence for Plants in Space. We visited one of the nodes at University of Adelaide yesterday, and a program that is innovating how you synthesize plants and proteins and medicines and plastics in space is going to drive important sustainable benefits here on Earth to address food security and to address sustainable agricultural production. So in all of our investments, we need to tell that story of that spin back and that importance of innovating in the harshest of environments. The rapid transformation of our space industry over recent years, as illustrated just by these few examples, together with accelerated but yet uncertain evolutions of the current geographical context, has changed the environment for the Australian space sector. It means that we must reconsider the national long-term strategic view. And I want to acknowledge my counterpart, Air Vice Marshal Catherine Roberts, Defence Space Commander, is with us here today, and the strong partnership we have with Defence Space Command, which is actually envied by our partners around the world. We're not burdened by legacy relationships. We're using these partnerships to ensure we develop an evidence base, to guide, direct and inspire the national space sector, building on the findings of the House of Representatives and our extensive consultations last year around the nation. So briefly, it's not without a question that we have the attention of the Australian public in a way we haven't had probably since Apollo. By our measures, in the last 12 months, we have more than quadrupled the national media reach of space in Australia. We're starting to have that everyday ear of Australians. But as household budgets tightened and potential scepticism in investment in space may rise, we must go back to these examples of why we go to space. It's a monumental task. Our participation in Avalon, and I congratulate AMDA on a successful Avalon, was pivotal to that. It was actually surprising. There's still a good percentage of the population that don't know we have a space agency, or that space goes beyond NASA and astronauts and Star Wars. We need to explain that criticality of space every day in life. And that's why we do things like have Astro down the road on Lot 14. It was a 10-metre inflatable astronaut that we put on display where you have a lot of foot traffic, Australia's largest festival, the Fringe Festival. That wasn't to talk about astronauts. It was to draw the discussion about why space matters, and we were incredibly proud to use that, you could say, Trojan astronaut to get that message out. Catherine's incredible feat as she goes through training this year will also add to that. But it's not just about exciting people. As an agency, we're doing the work to inspire and grow the next generation workforce, and we'll hear about this session today. We've partnered with the Andy Thomas Space Foundation and Makers Empire to deliver the Kids in Space program that is engaged with at least 10,000 primary school kids around the nation. We're working with One Giant Leap, as Hiroshi said, on JAXA's various programs, Akiba Robotics and the Asia Tri-Zero-G, to name a couple. And our Space Discovery Centre celebrated its second birthday last Friday, and April was the biggest attendance yet to the centre, and that centre continues to go from strength to strength. We've released Careers in Space Collateral, and we're working on how we can create graduate-ready, space-ready graduates for the sector. And we're determined to make sure this opportunity is for all Australians. Last month with NASA, we launched the National Indigenous Space Academy, a partnership between the agency, NASA and Monash University, which will see 5 Indigenous STEM university students undertake a 10-week internship at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And that's just the start of our commitment to embracing First Nations knowledge within the Australian space sector. So to wrap up, I wish you all a very successful 15th Australian Space Forum. I look forward to connecting you. I'll be walking Hiroshi and the delegation through the exhibition hall this afternoon. Please make these international delegations are very welcome to Australia. I know we will demonstrate great hospitality. They're here to see and understand the diversity and value of our sector and find ways to collaborate. As I said before, there's never been a more important time for us to have that meaningful role in the space sector we can earn and we can deserve. So thank you and all the best for the rest of the forum.
Whenever I listen to Enrico and also his predecessor, Dr. Megan Clark, whom I'm delighted to welcome to the forum today, I reflect that we are very, very lucky to have such impressive and inspiring leadership for our national space program. And it always gives me great confidence that we're on the right track and that we are achieving positive things, not just for the Australian community, but for the whole world. And so I'd like you to join me in once again thanking Enrico for such an inspiring address. Before we break for morning tea, we have two brief announcements. The first is from partners of the foundation. The first is from Minderoo, and I use the word partners to include potential partners. And I would be very pleased to invite Ms. Karen O'Connor, the missions architect and Fire Shield missions lead of Minderoo, to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to the organisers for giving me an opportunity to tell you about our exciting developments at Minderoo Foundation. Before I start, I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are meeting on today, the Kaurna people. Pay my respects to their elders past and present. Having worked in the bushfire space for a number of years now, I'm always in awe at the innovation that Indigenous and First Nations Australians have developed over the years. They've developed amazing methodologies and technologies to manage wildfire in the landscape, and methods that are still used to this day. So why is Minderoo Foundation here? Well, you may have remembered presentations in previous forums from Adrian Turner, the lead of the Fire and Flood Resilience Initiative at Minderoo Foundation. And he talked about the importance of Earth observation for natural disasters. So the Fire Shield mission within that program has the mantra, what if fires never became disasters? And we think a key element to that is really being able to detect fires as soon as they start in the landscape, being able to share intelligence and information with fire agencies so that they can respond accordingly and efficiently so that those fires do not impact communities and landscapes. We've gone a step further in the last couple of weeks. I've actually just come back from the US, where we have launched an international collaboration to support innovation in fire detection and response to help to take a step further in reducing the chances of fires becoming disasters. So what I want to introduce you to today is XPRIZE Wildfire. It's a new competition that has the potential to completely change how we detect and respond to fires. And it's such an Australian relevant problem, and a problem that increasingly countries around our region are starting to come to terms with. And we want to do what we can as a philanthropy, as an Australian philanthropy, to really support innovation in this space and drive some change in how we really approach the bushfire problem. And I wanted to come here today because I think the people in this room absolutely have the capability to win this competition. There's so much innovation here in Australia and around our region that we can put towards this problem. So, XPRIZE Wildfire is a collaboration amongst multiple philanthropies in the US and Australia. The title sponsors are the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, who work on wildfire in California, and PG&E, a utility company in California. Minderoo is proud to be the presenting sponsor for this competition, and we're also excited to have Lockheed Martin and the Hilton Foundation alongside. So it's truly a global collaboration to develop this competition. And I'd also like to acknowledge the expertise particularly provided by the Australian Space Agency. Thank you so much, Enrico. In developing parts of this competition, we've really had so much support from people across the world to help us to really make sure that this is a competition that is audacious but achievable. So what is it? It's an $11 million US competition prize pool, which right now equates to more than $16 million Australian. That's the prize pool we've created across 2 tracks. The first one is early detection at scale, and the second one is about response across smaller areas of landscape. So we're trying to solve 2 major issues here with this competition. We want to be able to give fire agencies the intelligence they need to know where fires are lighting across our vast landscape, and also develop new tools to be able to do something about it when we don't have all of the infrastructure and resources available. So, and I'm going to have to look around because I don't have this on my notes. So to win Track A, teams will have a minute to accurately detect all the fires across a large landscape, and 10 minutes to precisely characterize and report that information to ground stations. We've worked with fire agencies across the country, and they think this is a game changer for them if this can be achieved. The second track is autonomous response, and in the finals, the teams will have 10 minutes to autonomously find a fire within a 1,000 square kilometer landscape and put it out. In addition to these 2 tracks, each of them has a $5 million US prize pool, and then in addition to that, there's a $1 million bonus prize provided by Lockheed Martin for detection. So we're really excited about the collaboration and the opportunity that this competition provides. Timeline. We're always pretty audacious with timelines, and you'll see here it's a 4-year prize, but the Earth observation component, the component that's about detection, we've tightened that timeline to 2 years. And the reason we've done it is that this part is really, really urgent. We will have large fires like the Black Summer fires again in the next few years. Currently, I don't know if everyone's aware, but more than 90% of fires in Australia are detected by someone seeing it and picking up a phone and dialing 000. We can do better than that, and we want to do it quickly. So I would like to encourage you all to go to the website. There's a lot more information there that you can find out about this competition. I encourage you over the next break to talk to each other. Think about this opportunity. Think about what you can contribute to it and how maybe you can collaborate with some other people in this room to solve it, because I absolutely think it's solvable in the time frame, and I absolutely think that the people in this room can really develop some amazing innovations that would help with that. So I thank the organizers for giving me the space to talk about this today, to announce this opportunity, and I really hope that you'll all look towards how you can help to solve it, how Australian innovation and innovation from our region can help to solve this very Australian relevant problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And our final speaker this morning is one of our strongest and most long-standing supporters and partners, the AMDA, the host of the air show and a number of major events in Australia. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Justin Giddings, the CEO of AMDA, to say a few words.
Okay, good morning everybody. Look, I'm just here really quickly just to thank everybody, in particular the entire industry, for their participation and support of the air show that we had earlier this year. It was by far the biggest and best air show we've ever had, and space represented a large proportion of it. 11% of our exhibitors were space related, off a base of probably 0 in 2019. So it certainly was an excellent event. We had 248,000 people through. Great opportunity to expose the industry to kids who were there for the first time. Kids were free, so the whole purpose was to bring kids in, to expose them to the industry, and I think we were very successful. We had 794 participating companies. That's an increase of nearly 20% on last time, and 234 official delegations. So I just want to thank the Australian Space Agency in particular for their sponsorship and support, and for what they were able to bring at the event, which was by far the biggest aviation event ever held in this country. We had an amazing STEM program. We had on one day, I think, 700 students from around the country, mainly in Victoria, but around from South Australia as well, came over and were able to participate and get exposure to some great, not just universities and TAFEs, but industry as well. As part of the air show, we also launched an Al Warden Endeavour Space Scholarship Program, where we were able to take 4 kids from around Australia to the USA for a space camp for a week. And that was very successful. They're going in July and they've been selected, and I think there's a press release that's going out today about that. But I can also announce that when we have Indo-Pacific later this year, we'll be doing the same thing. Even though it's a naval event and space, we think that it's so popular and so, I think, so important to keep up the momentum, not just do this every 2 years, that we're doing it again. And that's in conjunction with the Coleman Foundation, which look after a lot of our US exhibitors. So keep an eye out for that one. There'll be more students available to go across to the USA for a space camp, and a great opportunity for doing that as well. So planning for the Avalon 2025 is well underway. I'm here with my colleagues Matt and Tracy, so please come and see them if you are interested, because we sold out. We had 111 companies that couldn't actually exhibit at our last air show. We're looking to expand and make it even larger than ever. I don't want more people though, because no more cars, because if you'd been there and you got stuck in the traffic, I apologise. So no more people can come, but certainly more exhibitors and more students and more kids. That's the whole aim. So please see Matt and Tracy if you are interested, because like I said, it sold out about 6 months before the show last time. Enjoy your morning tea. Congratulations on a wonderful conference, and thanks for allowing me just to thank everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Justin. Before I sign off as MC and hand over to Stacey Lee, I'd just like to say a special word of thanks to our amazing foundation team that has done all the hard work to produce this conference, led by Grace Portalisi, Darcy Watson, our Executive Officer, and Shanna Sheldrick, our professional conference organiser. So we couldn't do it without such an amazing and dedicated team. and I'd just like to personally thank them before I sign off. We'll have a 30-minute break, and please enjoy morning tea and the exhibits, and come back in about half an hour. Thank you.